Hi everyone, and welcome back to InsideTech. So the Powerbeats Pro have finally arrived in the UK, and with their release comes a potential solution to a common issue with Apple's AirPods. With many people unable to keep AirPods in their ears, and also missing that in-ear design that's typical of true wireless earphones, the much anticipated Powerbeats 3 successor seems to tick all of the right boxes. With an isolating in-ear design and secure ear hooks, the Powerbeats Pro are not only a promising choice for exercising, but also as a great all-round device for wireless music streaming. With a new industry-leading 9-hour playback time, a sweat and water-resistant design, and intelligent software courtesy of Apple's H1 chip, the Powerbeats Pro, on paper, seem to be the real AirPods killer. In this video, I'll be covering all of the new features, comparing these with their Powerbeats 3 predecessor, and of course to the new AirPods, to see if these can finally dethrone the world's best-selling true wireless earphones. Hopefully by the end of the video, you'll have a better idea which of these three is the right option for you. Let's take a look. Now before we take a look at the Powerbeats Pro themselves, we should start by taking a look at the charging case, which is perhaps the largest charging case for true wireless earphones we've seen so far. Bringing in the AirPods for comparison, the Pro case seems absolutely huge. Now in fairness, the AirPods case is one of the smallest cases on the market, but even compared to the competitors, the Powerbeats case is one of, if not the largest charging case out there, so it certainly won't be as convenient to just slip these into your pocket like you can with the AirPods. Just like AirPods, the case is charged with a lightning cable, and there's also a small LED indicator at the front of the case to provide charging information. This marks the first change from the Powerbeats 3, which charge via micro USB, and of course these are unique in that the earphones themselves are charged, whereas the Powerbeats Pro and AirPods both have the case charged, which in turn charges the earphones. The change from micro USB to Lightning is an improvement and a step in the right direction, but USB-C would have been my preferred choice here. Unfortunately, unlike the new AirPods, there is no wireless charging option with the Powerbeats Pro, which, just like the Powerbeats 3, can only be charged via a cable. Opening up the case, we have a familiar magnetic style hinge we've seen with the AirPods, although you're going to need two hands here, and it's not as easy and simple as opening up the AirPods case. Just like AirPods, the Powerbeats Pro charge through magnetic charging contacts on the underside of the earphones, and still snap magnetically into the charging case. Since the Powerbeats Pro have the same H1 chip found inside the new AirPods, opening up the case will actually initiate pairing mode and will almost immediately appear on the screen of your iOS device. The earphones automatically power on and off when removing them from or placing them back into the charging case, and will immediately reconnect to the last connected device. The Powerbeats 3 also have the instant pairing feature, and you'll just need to press and hold the power button to activate this. The Powerbeats Pro, just like the other two earphones, are also compatible with Android, and to start pairing you'll just need to press the button on the charging case instead. The bulky case will of course be one of the biggest points of criticism amongst reviewers, but in fairness to Beats, the Powerbeats Pro are one of the only flagship true wireless earphones with an ear hook design, and these of course necessitate a much larger charging case. Overall, the design is pretty good, but the case is undeniably bulky, and not especially compact for travelling like the AirPods. So getting a close look at the Powerbeats' new design, despite the obvious similarities to the Powerbeats 3, there's actually a new shape, new control scheme, and new materials used here. The earphones and ear hooks now have a much softer matte finish, and the new angled design is not only more modern, but supposedly improves comfort too. Where the Powerbeats 3 used an inline remote for music and volume controls, the Powerbeats Pro feature these on the earphones themselves. The Beats logo is now a clickable multi-function button, used for play, pause and skipping tracks. You only need to apply light pressure to activate the button, which saves you from having to press the earphones painfully into your ear, but because of the non-linear design, this is largely mitigated anyway. But my favourite feature here is the separate volume control on top of the earphones. What's really great here is that both earphones have identical controls, so you can use either earphone to control your music and also use either independently, for example if you want to charge one earphone while still listening on the other. This is also true of AirPods, which again don't use the master-slave configuration we typically see with these earphones, so you're free to use either the left or the right on its own. The physical volume keys give the Powerbeats a huge advantage over AirPods, where you'd need to ask Siri to change the volume. This is still reasonably fast, but ultimately it does interrupt your music, is much slower than pressing a dedicated button, and let's face it, it can be embarrassing to talk out loud to your earphones in public. One of the biggest drawbacks of true wireless earphones is having to cram multiple controls into such small earbuds, and volume control is either difficult to use or is completely omitted altogether, as is the case with AirPods. The Powerbeats Pro exploit their larger size with a separate volume key, which makes using the controls so much easier, and also far more practical than simply taking the Powerbeats 3 design and cutting off the wire. The AirPods of course use touch controls, and as I mentioned in my full review, there are often issues with registering commands, and from having such a limited control scheme. The Powerbeats Pro are certainly much easier to use to control your music and phone calls, and largely due to that separate volume control, probably have the best control scheme for any true wireless earphones. If I could change just one small thing though, I'd have a press and hold on the volume keys to skip tracks, rather than having multiple presses on the Beats button, just to make things a little easier. Everybody knows and recognises the iconic AirPods design, but the most common complaint here is the lack of isolation provided, since there are no ear tips. The advantage of course is that it's easy and convenient to quickly place AirPods in your ears. From charging case to playing music, the entire process is incredibly simple, and not quite as easy with the earhook style Powerbeats. They do of course have the advantage of having ear tips though, which creates a tight seal in your ears to block out unwanted noise, and also helps to improve bass response and make your music more immersive. Not to mention that there are multiple sized ear tips, and with the adjustable earhooks, there's much more chance you'll be able to achieve the right fit with the Powerbeats, whereas the AirPods one size doesn't necessarily fit all. The passive noise isolation is obviously much better with the Powerbeats than the AirPods, one of its biggest flaws, and the sound leakage is consequently reduced here too. Still, the Powerbeats don't block out all passive noise, and there are many competitors that do a better job here, although a lot of this will be dependent on your ear shape and how tight a seal you can form with these earphones. The Powerbeats Pro and AirPods also have proximity sensors to automatically pause and play your music when placing the earphones into or removing from your ears, which isn't possible with the Powerbeats 3. Auto pause can even work when watching videos and does still work on Android too. The feature is accurate and works very quickly. It is one of the best auto pause systems for any true wireless earphones. I would however say that the AirPods are more comfortable to wear over longer periods of time. With such a lightweight design and no ear tips pushing into your ear canal, there's minimal ear fatigue. Once you place them in your ears, you can quickly forget you're even wearing them. Despite the minor improvements to comfort with the new Powerbeats Pro, they still suffer from the same issues as the Powerbeats 3, where ear soreness sets in much sooner, and the earhooks can also cause some ear fatigue after a couple of hours. If comfort is a major factor for you, then not only are the AirPods more comfortable, but many other competing earphones are too. If really long listening sessions are going to be important for you, I'd recommend AirPods ahead of the Powerbeats. There's less to separate the two Powerbeats in terms of comfort, but the newer Pros are actually a little bit smaller and lighter than the Powerbeats 3. In keeping with their sporty design, both the Powerbeats 3 and Pro are sweat and water resistant. No specific IP rating is provided here, but it is thought to be similar to IPX4, so for sweat and light splashes of water, both should be fine. The new AirPods didn't receive any specific water-resistant properties since their upgrade from the original AirPods, but teardowns have shown a water-resistant mesh over the speaker grille, meaning that they would likely perform as though sweat-proof. But I should emphasize that, unlike the Powerbeats, there is no specific water resistance provided with AirPods. Combining this property with the earhook design, the Powerbeats are clearly designed with sports use in mind, and are much more suitable to wear whilst exercising than AirPods. I can also imagine that the Powerbeats physical buttons will be much more useful when using these in the rain or with sweaty hands, where the AirPods touch controls would essentially become useless. The Powerbeats 3 were previously one of my favourite sports earphones, but no longer having that dangling wire has been really liberating with the Powerbeats Pro. The wire could often get caught in clothing, and could perhaps even be a potential hazard at the gym, so I definitely prefer the freedom offered with the truly wireless Pros. AirPods falling out of people's ears is one of their most common complaints, so the Powerbeats do have an advantage by offering that guaranteed security. The Powerbeats Pro and AirPods have dual beam-forming microphones and speech-detecting accelerometers to enhance your voice during phone calls. Despite not having the long stem of the AirPods, the microphones on the Powerbeats Pro picked up my voice really well. With the Powerbeats 3, the microphone tends to naturally hang just behind my ear, and it can be more difficult to be heard, so I'd often need to rest the cable around the front of my neck during phone calls. All three provide a pretty clear voice, but you will still pick up a fair amount of background noise during calls, since there isn't much cancellation here. As I mentioned in the intro, the Powerbeats Pro set a new industry standard for battery life, offering a huge 9 hours of playback from a single charge. The case then holds around 2 extra charges for a total of over 24 hours of battery life, the same as offered with the new AirPods, although these only provide 5 hours of listening per charge. By comparison, the Powerbeats 3 offer 12 hours from a single charge, but obviously don't have a charging case to provide additional battery life. All three earphones offer fast charging, with the Powerbeats Pro offering 1.5 hours battery after 5 minutes of charging, and the Powerbeats 3 offering around 1 hour. The AirPods fast charge is instead quoted as providing 3 hours of playback after 15 minutes, which would suggest a fast charge performance similar to the Powerbeats Pro. The AirPods are of course also available with a wireless charging case too, which isn't possible for either of the Powerbeats. To conserve battery life, the Powerbeats Pro have auto on-off sensors to detect when the earbuds are idle and will automatically enter sleep mode. Once you place them back in your ears, they'll instantly wake and you're ready to go. iOS users will also be able to take advantage of having detailed battery information for all three of these earphones, including for each of the left and right earphones and their charging cases. In terms of connectivity, all three of these earphones benefit from Apple's performance-enhancing software, with the W1 chip in the Powerbeats 3 and the H1 chip in the new AirPods and Powerbeats Pro. Essentially, both chips allow the instant pairing feature and switching between devices. The difference being that the newer H1 chip offers faster switching and connections, including with phone calls, and also provides a lower latency. In real-world use, both AirPods and the Powerbeats Pro do connect and switch devices noticeably faster than the Powerbeats 3. Latency when watching videos is also improved here too, with video and audio perfectly synchronized with the AirPods and Powerbeats Pro, although the latency is still pretty low with the Powerbeats 3 anyway. Unique to the H1 chip though is the Hey Siri feature, which allows you to summon Siri using just your voice, which isn't possible with the Powerbeats 3. All of these features are of course exclusive to Apple devices though, and won't work on Android, so do expect much slower connections and higher latency too. In terms of the Bluetooth range, all three of these earphones performed really well in the line of sight test. The AirPods range is already one of the best on the market, but both the Powerbeats 3 and Pro far outperformed them with a huge 500 plus foot range. What you can draw from these results is that the Powerbeats antenna are likely better positioned for the line of sight test compared to the AirPods, but also that the W and H1 chips are responsible for the speed of connections more so than the actual range. Although I was surprised to see the Powerbeats 3 perform this well, given that they have an older version of Bluetooth compared to the other two. Of course, this test just gives you an idea of the relative performance, and it's very unlikely you'll ever actually use the earphones in a line of sight situation like this. In more realistic situations, such as having a phone close by in a pocket, there were no dropouts whatsoever, including when paired to Android devices, although do expect much shorter range if using any of these on Android. When it comes to audio quality, the Powerbeats Pro mark a departure from Beats' signature bass-heavy sound. The audio is actually much more similar to the new AirPods, and when compared to the Powerbeats 3, there's much more clarity and refinement. Interestingly, teardowns have actually shown very similar drivers in the Powerbeats Pro to the new AirPods, so this does make sense. The new sound has a much better balance to it. There's a brighter tone as opposed to Beats' classic warmer sound, and vocals are forward and crisp. What some may argue is a downgrade though, is that there is noticeably less bass compared to the Powerbeats 3, so depending on your music preference, you may well have expected more from the Powerbeats Pro. Essentially, they've swapped heavy bass for a cleaner and higher quality audio experience, but there's still a decent kick to the bass to give your music a nice richness. I can understand why many reviewers have claimed a much better bass response than AirPods, but I do think that this is more to do with having those ear tips and that isolating seal in your ear, as opposed to the drivers creating more bass. You'll really notice this difference outside or in loud environments though, where AirPods can easily become drowned out by loud external noise. As I mentioned earlier though, the Powerbeats isolation still isn't perfect, and I did find myself cranking up the volume to really hear that bass, especially when working out, and I often listened at around 75% volume, where I typically listen at around 60%. The higher clarity can also be harder to appreciate when using these for sports. There are often many distracting external sounds whilst working out, so I can understand those who prefer the heavier bass in the Powerbeats 3. Purely as a music consumption device though, the AirPods and Powerbeats Pro easily sound much better, so you should look to either of these if audio quality is your main priority. So taking a look now at the prices, as you'd have probably guessed, all three of these earphones are on the more expensive end compared to the competition. The AirPods are the cheapest of the three, retailing from £160 or dollars, but since the Powerbeats 3 have been available for some time now, you will likely find these for much cheaper than their original price. On Amazon for example, you can find these for under $100. At the other end of the pricing scale, you'll find the Powerbeats Pro, which are retailing for £220 or $250. The new AirPods and Powerbeats Pro will likely be selling at their original prices since they've only recently been released, but of course you could find these discounted too. One interesting thing to note is that Apple don't use the 1-to-1 pricing ratio for their Beats products, despite having acquired the company back in 2014. This means that, in the UK, the AirPods are more expensive than in the US, whereas the Beats prices fortunately factor in the exchange rate. This also means that the Powerbeats offer better value for money in comparison to AirPods for UK customers, whereas US customers could save nearly $100 by choosing AirPods over the Powerbeats Pro, especially if you consider the non-wireless charging model to be the direct competitor. Ultimately though, the Powerbeats Pro are a very expensive pair of earphones, and there is certainly a good reason to consider the other two earphones when you factor in the price. The Powerbeats Pro are obviously a feature-packed pair of earphones, but still on the expensive side compared to its competitors. There are two features I'd really like to have seen included here that would not only make the Pros very good value for money, but arguably the best true wireless earphones on the market altogether. The first of which is an ambient sound mode. This is also known as aware mode, hear through, and many other terms, and essentially this is the feature that turns on the microphones and allows you to hear your surroundings. This feature is very popular, especially amongst runners, and for a pair of earphones so clearly optimized for sports, I was disappointed not to see this option with the Powerbeats Pro. They do allow a little environmental noise to filter in passively as a result of their design, but a dedicated ambient sound feature would have been nice here. The second desired feature provides very much the opposite effect, and this would be some form of active noise cancelling. Now I'll admit that this is difficult to achieve with the smaller style of true wireless earphones, and Sony are pretty much the only major brand who have attempted to include real ANC, and admittedly with mixed results. But I had hoped that Beats could have taken advantage of the Powerbeats' already larger design to incorporate some form of ANC here. I'll admit that this is a pretty tall order, but adding these two features to the Powerbeats Pro really would have justified the high price tag, transforming them into the ultimate music streaming device and probably the best all-round true wireless earphones on the market. The Powerbeats Pro are one of the best and clearly most expensive true wireless earphones on the market, but they're also the only flagship model offering full-sized ear hooks for guaranteed stability. There's a huge market for people who like the freedom of true wireless but can't trust the earphones not to fall out of their ears, so the Pro's design makes them unique and one of the best options for sports use. But despite how great the connectivity and battery life is, I perhaps wouldn't recommend the Powerbeats Pro as your daily listening device, since there are more comfortable and even better sounding earbuds out there for much lower prices. These are really designed for, and should only be considered by, those who need earphones for exercising. So unless you specifically need a sports-compatible earphone, I'd actually recommend AirPods ahead of the Powerbeats Pro here. If you had to choose a single word to describe why AirPods are so popular, it would be convenience. Despite all of their flaws, AirPods are simply the most convenient true wireless earphones on the market. From the small and compact easy-to-use case, to instant pairing to your device, to quickly placing them in your ears and achieving the right fit straight away, the entire process is quick, simple, and quite frankly, the reason that AirPods are the best-selling true wireless earphones. They don't have the best sound and they don't have the best controls, but they're convenient, and for this reason many people should choose these ahead of either the Powerbeats 3 or Powerbeats Pro. As I mentioned in my full AirPods review, the exclusive features to iOS, such as instant pairing and Hey Siri, mean that it's very difficult to recommend either AirPods or Powerbeats to Android users. Even without those features, they're actually still pretty decent earphones to use on Android, it's just that it's almost impossible to justify the high price tags. Despite the fact that the Powerbeats Pro are the most expensive of the three, you could probably make the strongest argument for using these on Android, since they offer the earhook design and amazing battery life, which makes them pretty unique amongst true wireless earphones. Whereas with AirPods, there are clearly some better value alternatives on the market for Android users. The people who will benefit the most from these earphones are those who own multiple Apple devices, in which case you could probably justify the high price tags, since there are simply no other true wireless earphones that can offer as good performance. For anyone currently using the Powerbeats 3, I don't think it's worth switching to the Pros, since the wire-free design and slightly faster connections aren't enough to justify the price, and only first-gen AirPods users should consider this switch too, unless, as I said, you need them for sports. The Powerbeats Pro are perhaps the new best earphones for sports, but with the Apple exclusive features and the high price tag, they don't offer enough to dethrone my overall favourite true wireless earphones. That title still belongs to Jabra's Elite Active 65T, although do look out for my upcoming True Connect review, since I may have finally found a worthy successor. But let me know in the comments what you think about the Powerbeats Pro, and if you think these are worth it over the AirPods. And of course, if you have another favourite in mind, then do leave a comment with your choice. If you enjoyed the video, then please show your support by giving this a thumbs up. Be sure to check out the channel on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and of course make sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss anything else from InsideTech. Thanks for watching, see you all next time.